Hey everyone, it's Thursday. It's been a couple of weeks since I've spoken with you because last week was Thanksgiving in the US and I thought I would leave you all in peace to spend some time with your family. So I hope you didn't miss me too much. Hi, nice to see your faces. I was just saying that I wasn't on last week because it was Thanksgiving in the US, and I thought that a lot of people probably wouldn't have the time to come in because maybe you were there getting dinners ready or just even having a lie in because, of course, it's early in the US the time I have it. Good morning and happy December to you. It is the 1st of December. I don't know how it hit December so quickly. Try not to think about it. We're at the end of the year, but like this is the fun knitting time, right? It's getting cold and suddenly you have a sense that all of the warm things need to be knit. I'm sitting here, it's like I need a new pair of gloves. I have my youngest son in the car. He's got extraordinarily big hands. They're both very wide and his fingers are very long. And every single pair of gloves he finds in the shop, he's like, they're too small, they don't work. And I said, I could knit you a pair, you know. And he's like, oh, you could, couldn't you? And I'm like, would you like that for Christmas? So I think I might be knitting a pair of extra large gloves for my little giant at home because he's the baby. He'll be 17 in a couple of months' time, but he's now like a hair under 6 foot. So little baby is kind of a bit of a misnomer, but I get to call him that because he's still in our house and he's still under 18. So he's the little baby of the house. But yes, I need to figure out how to knit him hand knit gloves because the big, obviously for him, extra length, but what he's concerned about is the stretchiness and the fact that it doesn't hold its shape sometimes when you've got hand knit gloves. So I've been kind of thinking about it, and I may go for a superwash merino, but knit very tightly so that it uses the springiness of the superwash, but it springs back in again. So I must go dig through some of my hoards of superwash here to see if I've got something that would work well for him. But I think that will make a really excellent Christmas gift because I don't often get hand knit requests for my children anymore as they get older. But it does tend to veer towards the accessories. So I think a pair of knitted gloves are in my December future. Other than that, hats. Everyone likes hats. Does any of you out there, what do you get asked for Christmas? Who is Liz that knit your lovely mask? Liz is actually here. I saw Liz Dolan.75. Give us a wave there. And I'm going to introduce, there's Liz. You won't get away with that for much longer, calling him baby. You never know. He doesn't seem to mind. Nicola, that will work. I've done it before and they retain good memory. Oh, excellent. I'm glad my plan will work. So yeah, I've got, I think, my see something kind of darker, probably dark because it's going to get dirty, and maybe a little bit on the blue grey side. He tends to wear a lot of navy. You get asked to knit a lot of socks. Oh gosh, yes, I get asked that a lot too. My husband loves hand knitted socks. It's actually been a while since I have knit him some socks. Fingerless gloves. Yep, they're an excellent one too. We've got hats and cowls. It tends to be small stuff. For the most part, I'm sure there's going to be a few sweaters will pop up there that people get requested. But this is probably for anything other than small things, this is getting a bit late. Like you can handle like hats and gloves and those kind of things start December, that's perfect. If someone starts coming to you with a man-size sweater at this stage, that's going to be a birthday present, I think, a few months down the line. But I haven't been requested a sweater in a while, so. But I am going to go and introduce you now to our Christmas mascot. Here we go. Look at this. Liz, see Liz has just popped up there, and this came from Liz yesterday, which I think is the most impressive gift we have possibly ever received in Stolen Stitches. And I think that this is going to be here forever. This is Liz knit this you can see there's a little plushie, and the sweater, you may notice, we're twins. She knit a plushy size sweater in newer worsted of Hawthorn for this guy, which I think is just so cute. Thank you a million times, Liz. It was just delightful to receive this yesterday morning. Postman came in. I had a box of Rose's sweets up on the countertop, and he took a big handful for himself. So it was presents all around yesterday morning. I'm going to put him up here, and I think he's going to be hanging out there with... Oh, he's a bit squished. Sorry, don't squish yourself. He's going to be hanging out there for December. So maybe he'll move downstairs after that for the winter season. I've got a few more people. Eva, do I have a cabled headband pattern? I don't, but what I do have, that I don't think it's on the website, that it's one that I use for my classes. It's a variant on the Peterswell mitts, where it's that cable pattern, and I use it for putting around a cup holder. And a lot of people end up doing a double length because it's buttoned in the end, and do a double length and make it for a cabled headband. So that one would actually be a particularly good one for a headband if you were looking for it. Hand knit socks that don't fall down, realistic. It's completely realistic. Key to hand knit socks that don't fall down, you need to make sure there's a little bit of nylon in it so it's got some bounce. And the other thing that you want to try and do is, and this is the mistake that I often made with socks, when I started knitting socks, first of all, I assumed that I take the measurement of my foot and that's the size I would knit. And it was only after a couple of years of knitting socks and then being kind of a little loose, comfortable but a little loose, that I started realizing that socks, like hats, need to have negative ease. So you actually want to knit something that is smaller than your foot, and it really helps with staying on because it stretches to go on and then it fits a bit better, which is same thing with the gloves. You want a yarn that's got enough stretch. You can put it on, it stretches on, but that it will also bounce back so it's going to hold its shape. So that to me is the key for hand knitted socks. Jenny, he is gorgeous, isn't he? Making sure I haven't to answer. He needs a place of honour, says Elsa Louise. He does. He's going to be here with me for my lives, and I think he'll probably take pride of place downstairs in the shop. So when people come in, they get to see. Do you have a name for him, Liz? I feel like he needs a name, so we can have any ideas for names for the Stone Stitches mascot are all welcome to come on in. Today I've got two big things that I want to talk with you about. One of them is tonight our Stone and Stitches Seasons Club, our Winter Club, is going to launch. If you're already in the club, the rolling subscriptions, you may have renewed or it might have actually come through already. If you haven't joined before, or you just like to join for individual seasons, then that opens at 8 o'clock Irish time tonight. And we've got a guest designer for this one. It's Albina, she's an Irish designer in the west of Ireland, and her designs are just phenomenal. And she's particularly particularly in relation to colour work, which is what the two patterns that we've got for this club are going to be. The inspiration for it kind of follows on from what we had done before. In this whole year is about the flora of Ireland, the wildflowers, and what you're going to find in the countryside at different seasons. And this time of the year, there's not a huge amount of colour, but what we are starting to see pop up is you've got things like holly berries and the first of the snowdrops and things like that popping through. So these were kind of where the inspiration came from. The colours obviously are a little different, but that's kind of where she was coming from. The yarns we've got this particular seasons are also an Irish yarn. It's Soft Donegal from Studio Donegal, and it is one of my favourite Irish yarns because it's a merino yarn, but it's woolen spun, which means it's got a little bit of bounce, a bit of loft, and while it's lovely and soft, it doesn't have quite that same slick that you get with a lot of superwash merinos and things like that. Elsa Louise, have I knit any of her patterns? I actually have at the moment, because every design that comes in, they come in and then I actually knit through it as I'm doing the workshop. So I've been working my way through it. So I have been knitting through this particular design. Even though it's designed by them, it's obviously written in our own Stone Stitches house style. So if you're used to the way I write patterns and the way they're put together, it's going to be edited to look a little closer to that. Obviously, there's going to be little variations because every designer will have slight differences. But the terminology and the way it's put together is going to be closer to the way I would write patterns. So that it means that if you're getting a club, it's going to be quite familiar, the language and the way it's put together, the rhythm of the pattern, you know. But I've got, if I turn this around, I'd spoil the surprise, because I've actually got the whole table covered behind you with all of the notes and the camera and the samples for the Winter Club, because I've just 2 days ago finished actually recording all of the videos for the workshops. And so they're going to go off to editing tomorrow. So we'll be totally ahead of ourselves, because when we come back, first week of January is when it ships, and then a couple of weeks later it'll come out. So we wanted to get all of this part done beforehand. So it's just open for 2 weeks until the 14th from tonight, and then it closes until the next season's opens up again. If you are in the club, you'll be able to, and you're just waiting for renewal, it'll renew at whatever date you first got it on. So it's you should be able to see what's going on there. Hang on, I'll give you a look here. You're excited to finally see the live today. Usually you're working. Here I am. I'm at the live, and I'm in my matching Hawthorn sweaters here. We're matchy. Me and my mascot over here. So I'm going to show you the different colors that are for the Seasons Club. Where are we? Here we go. This one is our seasonal colors, and these are the soft Donegal. It's 100% merino, but let me lift it up closer here. You can probably see it's going to have the little flecks, the Donegal flecks, because that's how Donegal makes their yarns. They take these little nubs that are felted up, and then it's spun in with the rest of the yarn, and it's woolen spun, so it's very lofty. It retains a nice bit of air in the actual yarn itself, so it makes it very light to actually work with as you're working through it. So these are the first one, and if you can probably see here for the seasonal, it's 3 different tones. So if you were looking at this in black and white, you're going to have, this is your dark tone, this is your light tone, and here's your mid-tone. And that's what we're looking for when we're putting colors together. Is you want, in terms of the colors and the tonal range, you want a nice bit of contrast, because that always works so well with color work that the colors will really pop out. And in the autumn season, we had done a little bit of color work, and we talked, some of the things we talked about were different ways you can hold your yarn, and different color dominance, and the difference that's going to make. And we're going to kind of advance a little bit further and introduce a few new things and different ways of working different types of color work. But I'm not going to give any more away than that, because it's going to be a surprise for January. So that's our seasonal one. Here is the brights, which I actually think is going to be a really fun color combination. So again, this is your lights, mid-range, and your darker one. And the final one over here, hang on, let me just dig it out, because these ones I've been working on. I was using these for the samples I was knitting up, which is why they're in skeins. So this is the darkest, kind of a plum color for the subtle. This is your light one, and the dark grey is the mid-range. So this is not directly in relation to the club, but if you're ever doing colour work and you're in doubt as to whether your colours are going to work, if you know which ones are going to be combined in different places, take photographs, make sure there's a colour contrast, and you kind of want a little bit of a clash. I know that sounds weird, a little bit of a clash. It seems counterintuitive, but it actually helps, because it gives a little bit of oomph when you've got the colour work. Because rather than when it's all very monotone or all very much the same, it could be in either direction, it's not going to quite jump out as much. So you actually need a little bit of a surprise with the colours when you're working colours. There's a couple of questions here. Let me make sure I didn't miss it. Liz, it looks gorgeous. You're going with the seasonal this time round. Excellent. Yes, you saw the first one there, and that's good. It's very pretty knit up together. Are the neps well contained in the yarn? Are they just floating around the surface? I want to pluck them off. They're completely contained in the yarn. No, they don't. They're not. They're not pluckable. And the way it's done is, when you put this down here, when somebody's spinning yarn, normally you have the different color fleeces in different colors. They're put into a room and it's spun together, and then it's mixed up together, and then that is spun. They take one more step. The colors they want, the neps, they felt them into little balls, and then that's put in with the whole mixing room, and then it's spun. So they're felted enough that they maintain the color integrity. So it's obviously a different color, but it is still very much yarn and it still blends in with the rest of it. I've never experienced where I wanted to pick them off, so definitely integral. Liz, you're intrigued now. Excellent. Monica, you want to order the seasonal and the bright. Well, if you want to get extra yarn, just give us a shout and we can add in some extra as well to the pack. Just send us on an email, there's no bother there. Yeah, both of them are there, both of them very fun. Liz, you were the same as Monica. Sure, you buy in a few extra skeins. Exactly. Throw in some extra skeins, send us on a message, and we can add in a little bit extra if you want to try some more into it to mix it up a little bit. But that is actually the most enjoyable thing about colour work, is playing with the colour, experimenting, seeing what's going to happen. Swatching is amazing for that, because you can just do a little swatch and try out colour combinations, or try out colour dominance, because you can completely change the way a pattern looks depending on which hand you hold your colours in. Because colours, I'm on the other side here, but this is your left hand. Colours you hold in your left hand, you're going to have slightly bigger stitches, so it'll be fractionally dominant, so they'll stand forward. Ones in the right hand, you has to travel a tiny bit more, makes it a tiny bit tighter so that they recede back. It's really, really small, almost imperceptible, but enough to actually make a difference with how one of them stands forward relative to the other. I find it actually fascinating. And normally you want the pattern, or the main part of, if it's like a picture you're drawing out, or the main pattern where you're going to have dominant. But in the previous Seasons Club, Emer actually flipped it around, because the background one had sections where there was single stitches, and the single stitch, when it was left as a background colour, faded away and almost disappeared. So by flipping it around, she found she evened it out, and it just made it a little bit more even with the stitches. So sometimes there's a reason to flip once you keep it the same. Consistency. Always hold one yarn in one hand and another in the other hand, or if you're holding them in the same hand, always hold one on one side and the other on the other side. And it's really straightforward then. You're not going to mix up. You'll never swap back and forth. There's no messing around with untangling yarns, because they're always in their own place. My only difficulty with colour work, I was actually just talking with Laura about it, is that a lot of my knitting tends to be TV knitting, where I'm sitting and working on it. And colour work, because every row works separately, I'm trying my best to try and memorise the stitches as you're going through, and then look up, trying to watch a bit of the show and look down. So it's morphed a little bit into my Sunday afternoon knitting, where it's bright sunshine and I'm relaxed and I've got a coffee and I'm happy to sit and focus on the pattern. Because you do have to, because most of the time colour work changes each row, so it requires a little bit more attention to what's on your needles than some other forms of knitting. I guess I've become a lazy TV knitting in a lot of it. With combining it with two works pretty well for me, where I'll have a section where I don't have to think too much about it, and then there might be one really interesting detail section where I'm like, okay, that's going to be my weekend knitting or my daytime knitting when I'm awake and focused and I'm not doing anything else. And I love that combination of intensity, where there's some very interesting feature and requires all my attention, but then the rest of it is nice and relaxing. And so I might have a couple of projects where got one where I'm getting to the intense part, I'll leave that for the weekend, and then the rest of them, like, I can just happily get along and get some nice knitting done where I'm relaxing in front of the TV in the evening. So I've definitely a combination of different knitting types in relation to that. The other thing I was going to talk to you about today, before I forget about it, is all about Newgrange Shawl. Because I had a question on Facebook about this shawl during the week, and somebody was having a hard time picturing how these went together. And I realised it had actually been a very long time since I had talked about this. So I thought I was going to open it up and describe a little bit how it all fits together. This was a shawl. It's designed, I don't have a full opened up one, but I might give you a better picture of it here. This is a shawl that was designed by Lucy Haig for the book Echoes of Heather and Stone. And it has a series of these circular patterns. Each of these is done separately, and it's done from side to side with ribbing, cables and short rows. And so you actually do, there's 9 different little circles you do of them. See, if I open this up, you can see this is how the whole thing is laid out. See, there's one here for this one, There's 3 separate ones here, and then there's 5 along the end. So you do each of those ones. Then once they're done, you see around this one, you pick up stitches around it and you do some more short rows, cables and ribbing so that you just have that little section. Then you join these together doing the same thing, and then you join all 5 down here doing the same thing. And eventually each of these strips up here, you cast on stockinette stitch and you work back and forth, kind of joining a stitch, a live stitch from each end along here, and then you do the same here. So it's a really interesting but quite a complex setup. The way these work, so you start off by casting on provisionally stitches across here, and then you're doing a series of ribbing, just 2 knit and 2 purl, but doing short rows where you finish very quickly here in the middle, and then you start working across here, and then you finish in the middle and you start working across here, and there's one where you kind of do a little join in the center, and when you finish the whole thing around, you undo the provisional cast on and you graft the start and the end of it together. So it is it was one of those designs that I don't normally knit through somebody else's designs, but I was looking at it on paper and I only half theoretically got it, so I actually knit it to see how it fit together because I could only half picture it. And as I went through each one, it started making a lot of logical sense. But I found it helpful that there were so many of these because you really learnt the technique of putting it together as you went along each time. So it took a while to get it, but it was fascinating to knit with a load of interesting techniques, and I actually learnt quite a bit when I was doing that. So it's done in Newest Sport. I think it's only 5 skeins of yarn that for the whole shawl, but it is, if you want a challenge or something interesting new to learn for the new year, I would suggest Newgrange from Echoes of Heather and Stone is quite an interesting one. It was pre-workshop time, so like over the last couple of years, every time I launch a new pattern, I knit through the whole thing as I am actually designing it, or as I'm knitting it. I video every section, and that means that at the end of the whole process, I've got a full video workshop to go ahead and use, which is really, really helpful for me because I get to show everyone how it's worked, and for you because if you want extra help along the way, it's all there for you. But that was pre this, so when I knit through it, I hadn't done videos, which is a little bit of a shame, but maybe one of these days I'll get back to it and we'll add a workshop for it, because I think it's definitely one that could benefit from a workshop because there's so many techniques that are tied into the whole thing. So I think I'm probably kind of coming up to close to the half hour here. I'm going to say, if there's anything you want me to talk about next week or any more details you want about seasons or anything else, just pop the questions up here and let me know what you want me to talk about, because I'm happy to talk about anything. And we will have a couple of interesting things launching next week, so make sure you jump back in because you don't want to miss what I'm talking about. One of them is kind of a little present for you, and the other one is, I'm going to stay quiet, but we do have few exciting deliveries coming during the week that I've been waiting a while for. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to talk about that I put it in my newsletter last week, but I haven't talked about it with you yet, and it's our gilet. Gilet has come. We were going to finish up with gilet because it was meant to be just for the winter seasons last year. We actually completely and utterly fell in love with the yarn. It's organic merino from France, and it's very plush, it's very thick, it's got some gorgeous colors, and so as we were saying, okay, we need to sell off the remainder of the stock, and then we kind of got sad about it because we love the yarn so much. So we actually did the opposite. We ended up getting a few more colors. So we've got this one. I'm actually not even going to attempt to pronounce the names. It's Poivre Blanc, this one here, so a creamy one. Then this is Forêt, Forêt, so lovely green, similar to the Quilta green actually. And this one, which has proved very popular, it's in fact sold out almost immediately, and we've just gotten more stock on the way, is the Merlot. And you may notice that the Merlot is knit up in a Hawthorn stitch pattern because Laura just fell in love with this yarn and the colour, but wants to knit up her own Hawthorn. So she's going to knit it up in Merlot. The gauge is a little thicker, so she's going to be probably recording the journey as she goes through it, explaining what she's doing to modify it, and just make little changes to the pattern, because she just loves the yarn so much that she wants to make her hawthorn in that. So keep an eye out on that. And we've snuck in an order for 2 more colors as well, because we just, before we know it, we're going to be like swimming in gelée, because it's a lovely yarn. Much thicker than you think it's going to be. It's got a bit more, it looks like a light yarn, but it's actually, it's really is an Aran weight, I think. It knits happily at an Aran weight, even though it looks smaller on the needle or on the skein. So if you've got an Aran weight pattern or a very heavy worsted, I think that's probably the category it's in. Do I record my lives? I totally do. Yes, I will be putting it up for later up here, and I usually try to also put it into YouTube. I'm a little behind on the YouTube one, but I'm going to get this one up here this afternoon, so you'll be able to watch it again. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all, and I'll see you Thursday at the same time next week. Bye.